Skyborn Might, Madness, Temper, Benediction. What does this all mean? How do you make a good build in Wuchang Fallen Feathers? I've got everything you need to know to succeed in this new Souls-like. Let's go. Let me know any cool tips and tricks you have in the comments down below. We'll start with Madness, as it's one of the more unique mechanics for Wuchang Fallen Feathers. So how Madness works is essentially every time you die, you will fill up this Madness meter. You can view this when you're looking at your character screen. You'll see where your inner demon is at, but you can also just see it on the UI in the bottom left where the image of Wuchang is. The more red this is, the more actual mad you will actually be. Now, when your Madness increases to certain thresholds, certain things will happen. Above 50%, you will lose more red mercury or runes, essentially, when you die, but this will activate certain nodes on your skill tree. As you'll notice in one of the skill tree lines specifically, there are relevant buffs and skills and things that will activate when you're above these certain thresholds. 50 is the first of them. The next is above 90%, which is like the main one. When you're above 90%, you will lose essentially all of your runes when you die, and your inner demon will likely spawn at that death spot, which means you'll need to defeat them in order to actually be able to get your runes back, and doing so will reset your madness all the way back down. Now, the benefit of being above 90% as well is that it will allow you to deal additional damage as well as take additional damage, but you'll also gain more runes from defeating enemies. So there is a benefit to sitting at this high threshold, and something to note is that because you will deal increased damage and take increased damage, and chances are you're probably going to die a few times when you do take on some of these more difficult bosses, you will have a high madness during these encounters. If you want to reset your madness just to make those fights a little bit easier, not have to worry about having to deal with that, you can do this by fast traveling back to the Shu Sanctum and then going up the stairs to the top. Here there is a shrine that you can interact with and use a divine gift. This will allow you to reset your madness all the way down to 0. But there is benefits to having a high madness, and also at the shrines you can use the evoke option to buy some certain resources for the sake of increasing your madness. There is one that I would recommend to buy, and we'll talk about that later in this video. Moving on, one of the key mistakes you can make are really relevant to the skill tree in several different ways. All right, so firstly, something to note is that you can reset your skills as often as you like. It costs you absolutely nothing to do so, and you can reset individual nodes or the whole tree, whatever you choose to. One thing I will recommend that you do is you will have all the different 5-6 branches of the skill tree, but if you haven't actually put skills into them, they will be hidden from you initially. So at any time, like once you've leveled up a few times, say around level 50, whatever it is, I would recommend to reset your skills and map yourself out in all the different skill trees as far as you can go, because then you will unlock that tree itself and you'll be able to see what the progression is of that tree. Maybe there's something in that tree that you actually want to use, or if you say want to try different builds, you'll be able to see that sort of progression around how those builds will different work, especially through like that flask and vitality upgrade tree. You definitely want to do that because there's a lot of beneficial buffs in there, especially the capacity and effectiveness upgrades of your mana vase. Something to note is that these aren't actually tied to the specific skill trees. You'll need the Forgotten Remembrance and the Lost Remains resource that you'll find in the golden chests that you find throughout the world. These are often off the beaten path. You'll just need to go out and explore and find these, and you'll be able to use them. Now, these nodes, you can upgrade them up to 3 times. They have multiple levels, so you don't need to progress the tree all the way too early, as these nodes can actually be used 3 times to further increase those charges. The same is true for your weapon upgrades. These use a different resource called Red Feathers, or various copies of Red Feathers, depending on how far you go. Now, it's exactly the same with these nodes on the tree in their various weapon skill trees, that these can be upgraded 3 times, so you don't need to progress too far in the tree early on. You can use that same node to continually upgrade that weapon. We'll talk more about weapons in a little bit, but the last thing about the skill tree as well is you can do the same thing with some of the attribute nodes. You'll notice that they have like a little icon above them, like a little circle. These ones you can actually upgrade multiple times to gain additional attributes. So just something to note as well, that there's another way that you can do this with certain nodes. You'll only be able to do this with the ones that have that little icon. So pay attention to the level that it says, and if they have that little circular sort of icon above them, so you can upgrade that specific node to get even more attributes without having to invest yourself too far in the tree and just say, get 1 attribute point when you could invest in that one specific node and actually get like 5 from that one spot. Just like most Souls-like games, there are numerous side quests in Wuchang that aren't marked by any means, but there is a way you can see if you do have active quests with these NPCs, and that is via the teleport option on the shrine. When you do hit this option, if there are NPCs and you can talk to, they will show up there with a little icon. When you do see this, highly recommend you go and do this like immediately, because it is possible to progress and completely miss out in these NPC storylines. Like you defeat certain bosses or access certain areas, and that storyline will just essentially end or drop off, and you won't be able to complete it. So when you do see this, anytime you go to a shrine, definitely recommend to just hit teleport and check to see if there is any updates to different storylines so you can progress yourself. I would also recommend to write down some of these, as with all of these games, they're quite vague with what they're asking for, or even character names. Like I really struggled with character names in Wuchang Fallen Feathers because they'll have very different names, and I'm like, oh, who was that NPC? Like, what did they want? Like, and it's important to keep track of these if you do want to complete these quest lines. But the easiest one to remember is that anytime you beat any of the major bosses, you will receive an item that you can take back to the Tao Key gentleman that will be at like either the Shu Sanctum or the refugee camp, wherever, and you can give this to him, and that will unlock the boss's armor, as well as sometimes some other options as well. And the same is true for Wu Gang, the other vendor that you'll see at that location as well. Occasionally throughout the world, you'll find items that you can bring back to them, and when you give them these items, they'll unlock additional options in their store. These are often some of the best things to buy. Like it could be boss armor that's significantly better than your own armor. Sometimes you can get some spells from them, or benediction runes. There's a lot of benefits to doing this, so make sure you are returning to those locations, giving them the items and seeing what they can actually sell you. Now, we did discuss weapons a little bit when talking about the skill tree, but did you know that your weapon mastery affects all of the weapons in that category? So when you are investing in the skill tree and upgrading the, say, longsword mastery to increase your effectiveness with longswords, it'll affect all of the various longswords. So you'll be able to easily switch between them. Say if you find a new one that you want to try out and use, you won't have to worry about leveling that up individually. It's all of them across the board. And because you can reset your skill tree at any time, you can essentially just completely pivot to a different weapon category if you like. But one thing I wanted to point out is these discipline skills. So every single weapon will have a unique skill on it, and then a discipline skill that you choose from the skill tree that you can then add to that weapon. Now, there are multiple of these in the different skill tree lines. Would not recommend to waste skill points investing in all the different discipline skills unless you're actually going to use it, because there's no point in, say, unlocking all of the longsword discipline skills if you're only using the counter discipline skill, right? There is a couple of reasons to unlock them. Like sometimes there's benediction runes that give you various buffs if, say, you've got multiple unlocked. But outside of that specific example, for the most part, you don't want to waste those skills by unlocking discipline skills you're not actually going to use. And something else I wanted to note about weapons as well is your secondary weapon. You will want to invest a little bit in that skill tree, especially because of the swift draw attack, which is actually really valuable to use and strong as well. So by pressing in the left analog stick, you'll do swift draw, which will immediately switch you to your other weapon and do that weapon skill immediately. So it's a fantastic way to deal a bit of extra damage, weave this in with your attacks, especially if you've got some really powerful weapon skill on that second option. You can then trigger that effect very easily for the cost of only one Skyborn Might when you do use that swift draw trigger. And don't forget about the benediction runes that you can add into your weapon slot. So these do have like set bonuses, so do pay attention to that little icon as you can match them up as well and get an additional buff. So you essentially get 4 buffs rather than 3, and these can be freely switched around at any shrine as well. So if you are changing weapons often, you can freely move these to anything. There is one mechanic that will definitely see you succeed much more often in Wuchang if you use it correctly, and that is the temperance. So very early in the game, you'll get this needle that you can put like into your arm, like temper in your arm, which will give you a burn effect on your weapon. Now, there are multiple of these needles, but most of them actually come from the skill tree in that vitality line. So essentially here, you'll be able to unlock ones that, say, might add a different status effect, for example, poise break or whatever that is. But you can also unlock additional slots for your temper in that line as well. So there are different like acupoints that you can unlock, so you can add additional like secondary benefits, like say strength or vitality, agility increases, whatever that may be. It did also take me a little bit too long to realize that you actually need to trigger your temperance via the ability itself. So you'll have like an item that you can equip into like your hotbar slot that you can then trigger the temperance and actually add this effect to the weapon. Very beneficial for bosses, right? Like it's one of the easiest ways to build up status effects onto bosses by using your temperance and adding that status effect to the weapon itself, whether that be burn, poise break, etc., whatever you want to choose for your build, but it will increase your overall damage output. You can increase your overall stats. It's just very beneficial to use these in these boss fight encounters, and just generally when you are out exploring as well. While all enemies have resistances and weaknesses, the easiest example of this is the wooden enemies are weak to fire, right? Wu Chang also has this same issue, and there are plenty of boss fights that will use certain status effects on Wu Chang that make these fights significantly harder. And there's also a lot of areas in the game that have like these passive build-up of those specific status effects, like say the Corruption Caves, or in Cloudspire with Frostbite, you'll need to pop a spicy soup so that you can, not get that just like passive Frostbite build-up. Something to point out is that it is very important to switch your armor quite often and make sure you are matching these status effect resistances, as a lot of the armor that has the highest physical damage resistance to slash, stab, and blunt will also have very low status effect buildup, and making sure you're balancing these is important, especially on these boss fights that use certain status effects, right? Like, it's often more beneficial to wear armor that has a high resistance to the status effect that boss is using, compared to an armor that just has like high physical resistance. You can also increase your resistance to that status effect via items as well. The fixed origin pills is definitely the best option for this, as it just generally across the board increases your status effect resistances. Now, you can buy an unlimited amount of these from the Invoke shop at a shrine as well to increase your madness. It is the only cost, but these are really beneficial to give you like an extra almost flat 100 resistance to all status effects across the board, which will make these build-ups a lot slower and help you in these encounters when you do push into those boss arenas. There is also another buff that you should use for all bosses, and that is the Aurum Feather. These are gained from these birds that you'll see variously throughout the world space. Now, you'll just see these birds, they make this little like tweeting noise when you see them. Unfortunately, you do need to defeat these birds either by using a spell or just attacking with your sword or a flying dagger, any way that you can, and you'll actually get this feather that will give you a random buff anytime you consume it. You should do this before any boss arenas as well. All right, the last tip mistake thing I have for you is these like blue glowing things that you might find and what you actually do with them. This took me maybe too long to figure out, that I would like to admit, but essentially when you come across these little blue icons and they have like a little bit of text, you will then need to use some sort of a gesture or action next to them, and you'll get an item or a buff or something from it. The gesture you need to do is dependent on the actual flavor text itself. So for example, if it says, pay your respects, you'll need to use the worship gesture, or it may ask you to dance, and then obviously you dance, but whatever the blue text says, that's the gesture you need to figure out that you need to do. And you'll know if you get this right, because sometimes, you'll hear some dialogue or you'll actually get an item from it. And that's how you know you've actually done it right. But it took me way too long to figure out what to do with these things, so I did want to mention it in this video. But let me know any cool things you've come across in the comments down below. Thank you guys for watching this video till the end. Thank you to our members for supporting the channel. My name is Norza, and I hope you have a great day.